No memes. WoW vanilla was Naxxramas really that hard. Oh, is this it? Okay. Oh, it starts with a fair use disclaimer. Yeah, this guy's gonna talk some mad shit. Yeah, he's gonna talk mad shit. 100%.
Wait, what is this?
Hi guys, Iggy here. This is the serious critique of Hamster Wheel's Was Nax Hard series. Expect it to be more dry. He's made 3 videos, and we're going to see clips from all 3. I don't like how he portrayed Nax as this evil instance that was a barrier and people couldn't get into it and it was hard to clear and it killed guilds. I think Nax is very misunderstood. In case you didn't watch the previous video or couldn't stomach it, I raided in Bleeding Edge Progression Guild on the Nerzul server. We killed Kel'Thuzad, 14th in the world.
Nice.
I then moved to China and played with a famous Chinese guild called the Seven in Wrath of the Lich.
Oh, dude, this is actually, no, I want to talk about this right here. Look at this screenshot. This was the first guild that cleared BT back whenever they were released in China. Look at their fucking gear. Look at that mage. That mage is wearing tier 3. Look at the priest. That priest is also in tier 3. Paladin, tier 3 shoulders. Where's the rest of the pieces here? Is there any more tier 3 that I can see? I'm sure there might be a couple of pieces here. So these people were literally wearing gear from the last expansion. That is, in my opinion, they were just wearing it for the screenshot. I don't know. Maybe not. Because I knew there were people in my guild that killed Illidan with Neltharian's tier. And there were a couple people that were using like Stylene's Impeding Scarab and shit like that too. So that's not even true at all. Yeah, maybe they put on the transmog for the, or maybe they put on the gear just for the screenshot, but maybe not. Also, it wouldn't make sense like for this guy to only put on the shoulders if you were going to try to show off. People would use tier 3 back in BC rating, okay?
I believe I have the experience to fix some of the inaccuracies in the video. We're going to take a more friendly approach, and I'll do my best to lay off the memes.
One of the top rating guilds on the Frostmain server. Once again, not my guild. We didn't kill Patchwork, but we didn't kill Patchwork.
Okay.
I think we killed Anubricon, Instructor Azuvius, and one more.
He says he was in a top rating guild on his server, but that's relative to the population of the server and the quality of the players. He then goes on to say he only killed 3 bosses in the entire instance, which means everything after those 3 bosses he's never seen personally. So it means everything is hearsay, what he's read on the forums, etc.
Blackwing Lair for us was tough as hell too. You know, early Blackwing Lair, early Molten Core, it was pretty goddamn hard.
I'm not trying to be a dick, I'm sorry. I'm establishing a baseline for his guild. His guild, I would say, was average to below average, and there's nothing wrong with that. Casual rating is fine. I've done it myself.
Look. If your guild goes into Nax, it's not a casual guild. Like that's like saying a 5-night-a-week guild is casual because you're in Method. That's ridiculous. It is not. That's not a casual guild.
In other guilds and other expansions. This is like, for example, if I made a leveling guide. If you compared my leveling guide to someone like Joanna, Joanna would mop the floor with me.
Let me give you an example, such as the Locust Swarm of Anubricon.
This is Lotheb, not Anubricon. Now later in one of his videos, he shows a different photo of Lotheb, and aptly names it Lotheb, so perhaps it's just an editing error.
Hell, even the 4 Horsemen fight, you needed 8 geared tanks.
I think you just needed
8.
6, right?
I remember in my guild, we actually had to try and steal geared tanks from other guilds. We didn't do the 4
I think
Horsemen.
you do it with 6.
Did we actually? Not 1, not...
He then talks about the 4 horsemen.
Wait a second.
Perhaps it's just an editing error.
Hell, even the 4 Horsemen fight, you needed 8 geared tanks. 8! I remember in my guild, we actually had to try and steal geared tanks from other guilds. We didn't do the 4 Horsemen. Did we actually? Not 1, not...
He then talks about the 4 horsemen, the last boss in the Death Knight wing. He says that his guild had to steal tanks from other guilds. However, his guild never made it to the 4 horsemen. So this is a lie. In his review video, he then says, did we kill 4 horsemen? But trust me, he would definitely know if he did. The 4 horsemen dropped the corrupted Ashbringer. The 4 horsemen was the second hardest boss in the entire game. If you killed the 4 horsemen, you would definitely remember it. 4 horsemen was the cockblock for almost all guilds who went deep into Nax because of the gear tanks. Poaching definitely happened.
I threw it there with the 5-8 Storm Rage. 3/8 Cenarian, Height of the Wild, and I think that's the World of Arlek from Zuguru. That was my rating gear, basically.
Now I'm hoping this is a screenshot of him in his rating gear pre-AQ40, because if you went into Naxx with this kind of gear, you would get wrecked. If his guildmates had a similar gear level to
See,
him...
I don't know why, like, all right, here's the thing, is I don't know why a lot of these classic people are so intent on, like, reinforcing that they have experience from a game that was, like, 10 years ago, right? I mean, like, if you went and you played Naxx on a private server right now, it's going to be pretty much the same thing. Maybe it's 10% easier, or maybe it's 10% harder. But the amount of gatekeeping in the classic community is honestly funny. It's funny. If the guy cleared Naxx, then he cleared Naxx. It doesn't matter if he did it at 60, whenever 60 was the cap, or now. The difference between private servers and the actual game is not going to be that big. Like, I think it's so weird that people put so much stock and experience in a game from like 12 years ago. I just think that it's silly. Like, do I really have like, so like I did like ZG and shit in Classic, and I did all the raids in BC too. Does that make me an expert in ZG and the raids in Burning Crusade in like a way that someone, if they did them on private servers, wouldn't be? Not really, no. That just means that I did them before then. It's just ridiculous. Like, the only thing that this person, like, I think one point that this guy's actually making that does make a lot of sense is the way things like actually were, right? Because like if you just look at the raid in a vacuum, then you don't remember like all the other things that were like going along with the raid, right? And like this is what he was talking about before with like, you know, only doing certain bosses, etc. But I think there's a lot more to it than that. Naxx was endgame and he was experienced. I don't know what. I think the main thing is the AI and private servers is pretty scuffed. It's not that bad. It's not that big of a difference. The grind for Naxx consumables was insane. Well, I'm just saying, like, understanding the whole game and not just the raid's difficulty in itself, because there are more components that go into the difficulty of certain raids than just the raid itself, such as fire resistance and other different confounding variables of the game in that time period, right? So you have, like, badge gear. Like, what were people able to augment their gear with? What did people have options for, right? And, like, those are things that whenever you actually did play back then will give you a unique perspective, okay? Hopefully that makes more sense.
Then it's understandable that they all had a really, really bad time. Also possible that they just had really, really bad RNG, or perhaps their guild had a casual raiding schedule, which means they couldn't continue to farm Blackwing while progressing into Naxx.
I grinded with Pharaoh gear, but in resto spec because I didn't want to respec. I did next to no DPS. Killing mobs was horribly slow.
So he shows himself grinding very average mobs. Typically, people who grind mobs for gold would grind things like the Stayers in Felwood for the Felcloth and Demonic Runes.
Yeah.
Or you'd grind mobs
Is
that drop
this the
grays, like
Neckbeard
the
War?
bats in EPL. There were plenty of ways to earn money in vanilla
Yes.
without having to respec your main character. There was professions, niche markets. Look at Frost Radamus' amazing series on Rags to Riches. There was alts. You could use your alts to level. By the time you were in Naxxramas, you could easily have a second level 60 character. My preferred way of making income was doing GDKP. So we'd run Molten Core and Blackwing and then sell the items there to people who were looking to buy, such as...
Did they even do that? Like, I don't remember, like, was that even a thing in Vanilla WoW? I didn't even hear about that until, like, Wrath. Like, honestly, I feel like the whole thing is just... Yeah, and that's all right. Yeah, that's insane. We did in
mages for
BWL?
talisman of
Wow.
Imperial power.
Most guilds attempted Naxx 40 on weekends, so
Naxx was definitely not a one-day clear raid. So why would guilds raid both Saturday and Sunday? That seems extremely unlikely. Most guilds would raid 2 to 3 days per week on a consistent schedule, including weekdays.
dual spec, I would have loved to have that in vanilla. That would have been great.
No, it wouldn't have been great. Part of the charm of vanilla was your talent choices really impacted your gameplay and your reputation. So you weren't just a paladin, you were a holy paladin. You weren't just a rogue, you were a subtlety rogue. If you weren't in a hardcore raiding guild, you had more freedom with your talents. So as a
Okay.
shaman, you could put that extra point into elemental to get extra bursts for PvP, which made you much, much more valuable.
One person standing in the wrong spot means he will do damage to all the other players with a different charge, and it's so much damage that that one guy can wipe half the raid in
It's
less
not
than
true.
a few seconds.
This is Thaddeus, the last boss in the Abomination Wing. Thaddeus has an ability called Polarity Charge,
That's not
which
true.
divides the raids into positive and negative. Each group gets a damage buff based off how many people are there. If someone misses
Here's how it works, right? Is you deal like it's like 3,000 damage to everybody around you, but everybody around you is dealing 3,000 damage to you. So you would deal 3,000 damage to the people that are next to you, but you would take like 30,000 damage because you had that many people next to you. Like
the
even
polarity,
I know that's not.
let's say they go to the wrong area, they will hit everyone else with 2,000 damage.
2,000
2,000
okay,
damage is definitely not enough to wipe half a raid. Thaddeus has a chain lightning ability. Chain lightning could, in fact, kill people
If it
with
happened
a
at the same
polarity
time.
mess up, but it definitely would not wipe half a raid.
Keep in mind that all these raids I just mentioned were 40-man raids, and every boss dropped an average of 3 epics.
He views the lack of drops as a negative, when in fact it's a positive. Scarcity of loot was a very, very good thing. When your raid got loot, it mattered. And yes, it took a long time to gear up, but that also made it so much sweeter. Oh, our hunter finally got his leaf out of MC. He gets to do his quest, he's
Yep.
happy, everyone
Yep.
else is happy. You're happy.
Well, what are the question marks in chat? What are them question marks for? What are you question marking for? Well, quit it. You're fucking wrong. It's true. Scarcity of loot caused you to go back and do old raids. Oh, we didn't get it out of Naxx. Let's go do AQ40. Oh, we didn't get it out of AQ40. Let's do BWL. Oh, we didn't get it out of BWL. Well, I don't have a fucking job and nobody else does here either because we were just raiding Naxx. So fuck it. Let's go do Molten Core. I'm serious. Scarcity was good. Blizzard even admitted nowadays that they give out too much loot. That's bad game design? I don't think so. I think having to utilize the entire end game is actually good game design. You know what I think is bad game design? Doing one raid. You have like 4 or 5 different raids and you just do one of them. I mean, you do that one primarily, but that doesn't mean that all of the other ones just have no value. And the fact that there was scarcity of loot created value in those other raids. Is there another way they could have done it? Maybe. But the way they did it was fine.
For him, because guilds were an organism. You were playing together, you were a group, you were a family almost. And seeing other people get what they wanted, being happy, was a really, really good feeling. I remember I got Judgment Bracers out of Molten Core, and I was so happy. It was my first epic. It didn't matter that the stats were bad. It didn't matter that you couldn't really see it on my character.
So there were a total of around 60 to 70 people in that guild. 60 to 70 is a little bit far-fetched once again. It's not 60, 70. That's a little too much.
60 to 70 is definitely an exaggeration. I'm not sure where he's getting
50.
this number from. You know, perhaps if your guild is more casual.
Talon
and you
or
have a lot of
OD, is that who
casual
I think it
raiders with
is?
full-time jobs, you
Yo,
can't
thanks
always
for the
make
resub,
raids.
bro.
Then yes, maybe you have a lot
good
of
to see you. I heard you're
substitutions
getting
coming
married.
in and out. But for guilds who are serious about progressing through Naxx, and even late AQ40, you did not stretch yourself that thin with gear. I'd say it's more around 50, maybe up to 55.
23 guilds managed to clear the entire raid, which is less than 0.1% of the entire US player
Is
base.
he going to call him out for using a comma instead of a period?
The best information on this we
No,
have is
okay,
a Reddit
that's too
post
bad.
that lists 124 guilds having killed Kel'Thuzad before TBC launch. While the completion percentage of Naxx is quite low, if you add in guilds who got stuck on the 4 horsemen because of the 8 tank cock block, which was quite a few guilds, I think the number would be a lot higher. I think a more relevant question would be how many players have killed any boss whatsoever in Naxx 40 and vanilla.
So why were there so few guilds and players that cleared the entirety of Naxxramas?
Because BC was
He
coming
says
out.
the low completion percentage was due to 3 factors: consumables,
It's because
resistance
BC.
gear, and farming previous raid tiers.
That's partially
However,
true.
the biggest reason that Naxx was not completed by most people was because of its
Hey.
lifespan. Naxx was released on the 20th of June, and by October, the Burning Crusade had
There
been
it
announced.
is, dude.
That's 3 months. 3 months is a very short lifespan for a raid.
Imagine no lifing a raid so your gear can be invalid in 30 months. Oh wait, does anybody want to do BOD later?
Raid. People knew that a gear reset was coming. Why would they bust their balls recruiting, wasting gold, and working so hard when they knew they could just slack for a little bit and then bam, gear reset? Naxx was also much harder than AQ40. AQ40 had some interesting mechanics, like the Twin Emperors tanking, the beam on Cthulhu. However, Naxx required a much larger time commitment that some guilds couldn't do. It was also more punishing. There were a lot of mechanics where you'd screw up, you would kill yourself and or wipe the raid.
And now I know why so many guilds fell apart. It's because raiding Naxxramas is really f***ing expensive. But can you imagine doing progression raiding in Naxxramas?
I mean,
where you burn through your consumables, as every single wipe would cost them hundreds of golds in consumables. You also needed a ton of consumables.
I mean, yeah, obviously you need a
consumables
lot of
is-
consumables, right? I mean, obviously you do. Just 1 second, let me read this. Half the people in Classic will quit by level 30. Look, dude, I don't disagree with you. I think that will probably happen. I think most people will quit before level 30. Absolutely. I love you more than I should in a stranger. I'm glad you're back. I love to hear you debate this list with McConnell. Music is pinched too loud. Okay, well, at least it's not a problem now. Cody, thank you very much for the 5. No, I mean, McConnell, like, here's the thing. If McConnell wants to debate the list, I'll debate the list. But he knows that I'm right. Everybody knows that I'm right. And I'm right. So that's all there is to it. Can you explain why you rate BWD so low? Honestly, like, I just want to focus on a video. I can talk about that later, though. Firelands pre-nerf was hella fun. I don't really think... I mean, like, it was. Firelands was really fun. You're right. Alyssa's Roar was an amazing fight. Undisputed most badass raid ever by far and away was Ice Crown Citadel. Maybe lore-wise, but not actual gameplay-wise.
Really true. I mean, I don't know. In my guild, people didn't really use that many consumables, probably because we're noobs. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we never got too far. For Naxxramas, you had no chance without consumables. Like, literally every single raid I was in during Naxxramas, everyone was, like, buffed up the ass with raid consumes.
So here is a major contradiction. You needed consumables. They didn't really use them, yet every raid was certainly buffed with them.
And this was one of the things that really wore on me as a healer.
See, I want to say one thing, right?
Every raid was...
Is that... Okay. Whenever you're talking on stream for hours on end, you're going to say a few things that are a little bit contradictory. And also, these aren't necessarily contradictory. You needed a ton of consumables. That's a fact. And my guild, people didn't really use that much consumables. That is not... These two statements are not contradictory. He could come to raid and be buffed out, while at the same time, people in his guild were not that buffed out. Now, here's what I'm going to assume. Nobody was buffed out. And maybe a few times he used a flask. And it was expensive. So he'd remember it as like, man, fuck, yo, I spent a lot of money using consumables. I mean, there it is.
certainly buffed with them.
And this was one of the things that really wore on me as a healer. If you were a healer and you had to farm consumables...
Wait a second. Asmon, you're defending someone who is a known liar in the community. You do not know about him as much as you think. Hamster Wheel is a dumbass. He flexed doing Naxx when he never raided in vanilla to begin with. I swear the worst thing about Classic is the community. Who cares? Who cares? Like, he did Naxx. Like, if he did it on a private server, then he did Naxx. I mean, do you really think that it's that much different? Like, I think the variance between private server Naxx and live Naxx back in 2006 is probably less than 15%. And even so, I bet private servers make it harder than it was. Because I've heard Esfond has told me that, and other people have told me the same thing, where things are intentionally even harder than they were to make up for the fact that they don't know the exact values.
You were screwed because you did next to no damage to mobs. So farming was extremely slow and extremely painful.
As I mentioned before, there were plenty of ways to earn gold as a healer in World of Warcraft. As for consumables, the only ones that really uniquely affect a healer would be mana runes, because the ones in the open world are BOP. There are tradable ones, but they drop from Skullomance. By the time your server's on Nax, less and less people will bother running 5-man dungeons. The easiest solution would be to bring a friend and grind them together and then get Fellcloth off the demons. Compared to tanks and caster DPS, healers actually had it quite well off when it came to consumables.
That's so true, because also back in the day, you'd have to spend so much fucking money repairing plate gear that I had my guild start paying for my repairs, because I was like, I'm not going to go into Karazhan and spend all day wiping on the horses next to attunement because this guild sucks this much dick and have to spend 150 gold a night on repair costs. Like, you're gonna pay me for this, or I'm just gonna go DPS. Like, now they call it guild repair. Yeah, exactly. Like, Dirge's kicking Chimera chops were fucking expensive. And so are the flasks of the times. You can only farm Chimera tenderloin from, like, fucking these, like, elite mobs.
Tanks needed greater stone shield potions, Chimera chops, and Flask of the Titans.
Chimera.
These were pretty expensive, however. In my experience, guild banks would often help offset some of these costs. Even for farm content, you're darn right your tank will be using a flask. Casters had Flask of Supreme Power.
Not this tank.
While you didn't have to use this for farm content, it helped, especially on bosses like Thaddeus and Lotheb, where you get damage increase buffs. So what buffs would a healer be bringing to the raid? Sagefish Delight, that's the MP5 food, pretty cheap.
Who
Mage
cares?
Blood Potion, very cheap to craft. Flask of Distilled Wisdom, this was not needed or required ever. Sometimes you could make a case for popping a Titan's
Who
Flask,
cares?
maybe a Chromatic Resistance Flask on Kel'Thuzad, but no. Healers did not need to flask, they were never really required to flask. Wizard Oil, very cheap. There was the Gizzard Gum and Crystal Force. These were not required. You could farm them if you wanted to. I personally only did Crystal Force because it was super easy. And then, of course, there was mana potions. Major manas could get a little expensive because of the Dream Foil. However, superior manas weren't that much worse. Even greater manas were super, super cheap to farm. You could chug those like candy. Rank 6 pots. So from the PvP vendor, you can buy, I think it was 5. You could just chug those. Those were like, what, 6 silver each or something like that. It was super cheap. And then the Felwood buffs. So that's the Demonic Runes, Whipperroot Tubers, and Night Dragon's Breath. These were quite easy to get as well. And last but not least is protection potions. So assuming raid competence.
How much longer is this going to go?
Fire protection potions. They are only used on the 4 horsemen.
Okay.
As the expensive consumable boss. I will admit that. You could have an alt come in. Ring. Required an Arcanate bar. Glacial Vest was super cheap. From the instance. Here on Lotheb. Lotheb was a DPS race. An extreme DPS race. You had to min-max, go balls to the wall. Nightfalls were crafted.
People would bring all the world
healers
bosses
were DPSing.
or world buffs or
It was nuts. Putting Shadow Resistance gear on would extremely gimp your DPS, and you would wipe the image.
Look, I know people want me to watch the other one, okay?
The final step to actually getting into the instance
like
was the
2 or
attunement
3
quest,
more minutes
which was a bitch on its own.
So the next attunement, it was kind of expensive at all.
That's so true, dude. Like, I mean, look, there's nothing. Like, all right, no, that's totally true. Like, I got able to be in Nax, okay? I got attuned for Nax in vanilla WoW because I was like, oh, well, if I'm attuned, that means the guild's gonna invite me. Didn't fucking happen. But, and like, you'd obviously get fucking revered. You wouldn't even need the Righteous Orb. Righteous Orbs weren't really a ridiculous price because you needed them for Crusader. Everybody had Crusader on their weapon. Everybody was farming these out all the fucking time. You know, it was easy to get into Nax. It was easy to zone into Nax.
Honored, it was approximately 200 gold. But if you did farm your period best, you're most likely going to be revered anyways.
Because you didn't just fly to Naxxramas and there you go, you're ready to rock. Nah, every raid night in Naxxramas started at Yojamba Isle. First of all, on this isle you could trade in a reputation token for a pretty handy buff, Spirit of Zanza. And for fights where you needed a lot of HP and or mana regen, this Spirit of Zanza was an absolute necessity.
The Spirit of Zanza was a nice side buff, if you could get it, but it was not required ever.
Thing is, you need to be revered with the Zanlar tribe to get this, so that's another thing to take into consideration.
But any raider worth their salt would have already had their shoulder enchant, which requires Exalted.
The second reason why everyone gathers there is the Spirit of Zandalar buff. After that, it's time to get the Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer buff. It's another must-have. Alright, now that everyone's in Orgrimmar, what's next? In Felwood you can cleanse flowers, and those flowers give you an extra buff. The one you're looking for is the Songflower Serenade. So then, After all that, we still have to go to the Darkmoon Fair. After doing all that, it's finally time to get a portal to the Undercity and fly to Light's Hope. Once you're in front of Naxxramas, everyone starts buffing their groups, and when that's done, it's finally time to step into Naxxramas.
Okay.
And what do we do when we got back, buffed up, and wiped? We go right back to Strangletonville again to buff up for KT once more.
Wow.
So he's talking about the private server world buff meta. This was not a thing back in Classic. Yes, there were world buffs, they had cooldowns, and so they weren't used anywhere near the level they are on private server.
Well, no, of course
so
not.
Keep that in mind. Hopefully Classic goes with the vanilla and not the private server style of buffing.
It's almost like I have PTSD from old Naxxramas in that godforsaken place. Lots of memories there, but not all of them were really great. Nax 40 just destroyed our guild.
I think there could be some bias in his video just because of his negative experiences in Nax.
My one memory that goes above all other memories, besides the memory that I have of not winning Corrupted Ashbringer whenever it dropped, was there was this guy. I don't remember his name right off the top of my head. He was a paladin, and our guild master, or sorry, our raid leader. We got to the Four Horsemen, and we were sitting in front of the Four Horsemen. Everybody was just looking at them, and I asked him, "Do I have time to walk to the store?" And he's like, "Yes." So I literally walked to the store while he's explaining Four Horsemen. I walk back from the store with my friends, and we're hanging out. We don't even go back home immediately. We come back home, I put back on the headset, I unmute Ventrilo, and he's still talking. And then there was this one fucking paladin that for some reason, this guy was basically, imagine Z's, but not really, like, imagine, or you know what, imagine like a C-list Chad from a country high school. Okay, that's who this kid was, this paladin. And anyway, the paladin got kicked out of the raid. And this is while he was explaining everything, and he was about to pull the boss. And we could see the paladin running towards the Four Horsemen, down the little stairs, and then over, and then he was going to go into the room. And our guild master, or sorry, raid leader, kicked him out of the group. And I did the math in my head as I was watching him, and I was like, he's going to be able to pull the boss. And he's moving slower and slower. And right in like the last 3 to 5 seconds, he pulls the fucking boss and wipes the entire raid. And then everybody wipes, and then people obviously run around like chickens with their head cut off. The paladin bubble hearts out, and everybody is fucking pissed. It was the funniest fucking thing ever, and I didn't even care. But like our raid leader was going crazy. It was the funniest fucking thing. Yeah, he bubble hearted out. Exactly. I did that with the next. Yeah, I remember just watching him with the little fucking feet walking down the little stairs and just knowing for a fact that he was about to fuck this raid up. And like the raid leader was sort of like, "Get out of the room! Get out of the room! Don't you be in that fucking room! He's gonna pull the boss!" And everybody's obviously AFK because he spent an hour explaining the boss. So everybody's just sitting down. There's like 4 people offline, and he just kills everybody. It was the funniest fucking thing, man. Hunter Life. I mean, like, they did that dot, and so the dot probably killed people too. McConnell Leroyed you? It actually wasn't McConnell. I know that might be surprising to some people, but it actually wasn't McConnell. Why didn't you Ninja Corrupted Ashbringer? It's a mistaken judgment.
TLDR. Was Nax 40 really that hard? Yes, but that was mainly due to his ramped up difficulty. It was much, much harder than AQ40. It required a lot more time than AQ40, and there were some strict raid comp requirements like the Four Horsemen. Some consumables were needed, not that much. It was mostly time investment and getting the same people to consistently show up week in, week out. Once a couple people flaked, it was really, really hard to replace them. There was a lot of poaching going on. Getting replacement people was hard. We were one of the top guilds, and we had a lot of trouble finding recruits just because people weren't attuned
Every guild
or
was
you
like
were
that.
asking them to betray their friends. Hey, you don't like your group? Come over and play with us. We're pretty good. Some shady practices going on back then.
Take all your gear and leave.
Anyways, I hope
That's
you guys
right.
like this more laid back version. So, I don't really care if you like the video. I don't really care if you subscribe. You can if you want, but I don't really care. I made this for myself. See you guys in vanilla. Peace.
Okay. Okay.